You're listening to the Matt Lehner podcast. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed on iTunes so that you can catch every new episode as they get dropped to your feed. While you're at it, make sure you leave your comment to this podcast below so that I can tailor my messages to your requests. And with that, let's get started. You must be the person before you can become the person. You gotta have that mindset of working on your game like your life depends on it, because it does. Your mindset, your perspective, the way you approach setbacks will determine how far you get in this game.
Nah, you good. Good move, boy!
Hello and welcome to the Matt Lehner podcast. Today is Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving to everyone out there listening. Today I want to address a question I got asked a while back, dealing with the difference between jump shooting and set shooting. How high should you jump on your shot for ultimate shooting ability? Think the difference between Steph Curry and Russell Westbrook, for example. And right off the bat, when you think of those two players, you think of what? What's the difference between the two of them? Other than that, Steph's obviously a better shooter. The major difference is that Russell Westbrook is more athletic than Steph Curry. So usually, if you are a player who can jump higher, it will be to your advantage to have more of a jump shot, to jump higher on your shot so that you can elevate over defenders. But there's also more differences that come into play that will determine whether you should have a set shot or a jump shot. If you're shooting spots versus shooting off the dribble, if you're just catching and shooting, typically you will have less elevation on your shot and you'll just have a quick release. Whereas if you're shooting off the dribble, you have that extra momentum, just like if you were running and jumping, that you'll actually elevate higher on your shot. So that's typically a difference. If you're a taller player, maybe 6'5" and up, typically you'll have less elevation on your shot than a shorter player. Obviously, because you're taller, you don't have to jump as high to get your shot over a defender because you're typically on the taller side, versus a player who's shorter, 6'5" and under, typically you're going to have to actually elevate to get your shot over the defender. So that can play a role in determining whether you should have a jump shot or a set shot. And obviously, the bend that you have, if you have more bend in your shot, typically you'll have more elevation. But some players like Ray Allen, he would have a jump shot, but he wouldn't really use his legs. It was all his ankles. So that's not always the determining factor, but typically if you have more bend in your shot, you will jump higher on your shot. Now, what are some pros and cons to jump shooting and set shooting? Well, obviously, there's some pros to jump shooting is that you elevate over your defender. If you're an athletic player, you take advantage of that in your shot. Typically, it'll be harder to defend your shot the higher you jump, but I've experienced situations myself where when you jump and you're actually, waiting till you get to not the top of your jump, but pretty close to the top of your jump, it gives the defender a time to actually jump and block your shot if they're a quick jumper. So that's kind of a con when it comes to jump shooting, but that doesn't happen very often. Typically, if you're jumping over a defender to shoot, you will have the space to actually get the shot off. But obviously an advantage to set shooting, think Steph Curry, is he's got a good handle, so he's able to create space for a shot. And then when he has that little bit of space, he just shoots it so quickly that you don't have a time and a chance to actually react to it. So, that's an advantage if you have a quick release like Steph Curry. Not many of you probably do, but if you have a quicker release, you might not have to jump as high on your shot. Now, I do want to point out that whether you have a jump shot or a set shot, your shot shouldn't really change much from a mechanical standpoint. If you go back and listen to some of my other podcasts on shooting mechanics and podcasts dealing with shooting, you'll hear me mentioning this, that your shot shouldn't really change from a mechanical standpoint, meaning whether you have 90-degree bend in your shot with your legs or a 45-degree, or you're jumping 15 inches or you're jumping 10 inches. Your shot shouldn't change from a release standpoint, meaning like once you get the ball to your shooting pocket and then into your release, that shouldn't change. The height you jump, the bend in your legs, depending on what range you're shooting from, those things can change, but the actual release in the shot should not change. So ultimately, it comes down to you as the player defining what is the optimal height on your jump shot for your game. It'll come down to, how tall you are, how athletic you are, the experience you have playing thus far. If you're a shorter player and you have more of a set shot and you have difficulty getting your shot off, or you keep getting blocked, you might want to try to start working on a jump shot. This is something I did earlier on in my career in high school. I used to have more of a set shot, and I was a pretty athletic player. So one of my friend's dads that knew me and saw me in the gym a lot, he actually pointed out to me that I should start working on a jump shot. And I used to shoot kind of from my shoulder, not above my head, and he had me change my release to the top of my head like you see NBA players, the majority of NBA players doing, and getting more elevation on my shot. And I started working on that, and now I have a jump shot. So it depends on you as a player, how athletic you are, how tall you are. If you have a set shot now and you're able to get your shot off, and you're a shorter player like Steph Curry and you're able to get your shot off against tough defenders, then you're fine. But it comes down to your skill level, your height, your athletic ability, and how effective you currently are in your ability to shoot and get your shot off. So that's something you'll have to figure out for your own game. If you have any other questions, you can definitely let me know. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube, and you can leave your comments to this podcast there as well, or on iTunes, and I'll talk to you again on the next episode.